I'm retired Battalion Chief Larry Cockman from the Greensboro, North Carolina Fire Department History Book Committee. We're here today at the Greensboro Historical Museum. I'm standing in front of the General Green, the first steam pumper, or as they called it back then, the steamer. Today, December 9th, 2019, we are starting a new tradition of recording and preserving the heritage and culture of our retirees. Our retirees have contributed so much to the success of our great fire department. Their stories retire with them and are sometimes gone forever when they pass away. They will share their emergency calls that will always be a part of their memories forever. So sit back and listen as they carry us through their journey in the Greensboro Fire Department.
All right, well, Timothy Shane Gibbs, and I came on August 1st, 1985, and out of the 36th recruit class. I'm currently getting ready to turn 54 in January, and retired as a captain from Engine 7. I was adopted originally down in the Salisbury area, North Carolina, and then we moved up to Greensboro in 1976, and I've been here ever since. Before I joined the fire department, I had just gotten out of high school. I was 18, was a meat cutter for Winn-Dixie, and going to Hunter Hills Baptist Church, and that's how I got in touch with Skip Nix and Kerry Hensley back in those days, and that's what struck my interest. Well, when I applied for the fire department, you had to take a written test and go through a psychological thing, and then you had to come out to the training center, and you had to do this physical agility deal where they made you do all kinds of different things. And I remember that there was I was told, now I don't know if this is accurate, I was told that there was somewhere between 600 and 800 people who wanted to get on the fire department. And they were looking to hire about 28 to 30. Well, Captain Haney can probably help me with this. Starting salary was around $14,000 to $14,500. Well, when I went through training, I was young. I mean, I was, come from a broken home. I didn't have a father figure, and I'll be honest, I really wasn't ready to get on the fire department. It took me a couple years to really get to a place that was good, and I'll talk about that later, I hope. Yeah, and when I went through training, I was in the 36th class, and like I said, I was the youngest one. In fact, 2 years later, I was still the youngest fireman on Greensboro until someone took my place from another class. But they ran us through the ringer. I mean, things were a little different then than maybe they are now. There wasn't a whole lot of the politically correct stuff. They were hard on you. And I made life hard on myself sometimes. I mean, I did some stupid stuff, and they would rip me a new one. They would take me in there. We had Chief Brad Cox and Captain Paul Brooks, and the chief over training was Chief Frank Jones. And I got chewed out right regular, and but they hung in there with me. They didn't give up on me. My scores and my stuff was good, but I was still pretty young. I was 19 when I actually got hired. Well, growing up, my thoughts, you don't really know what you want to do, but it was when I was about 13, 14, being around Chief Nix, being around Chief Hensley, and all of a sudden I knew exactly what I wanted to do with my life. And I was so excited, but of course I was too young to apply. And I just had so much admiration for those two gentlemen anyway. And they would tell stories, and I was like, I want to be a part of that. Oh, well, gosh, we had Rick Cross and Chris Baldwin and Harold Haney and Clarence Hunter. In my class, we also had Calvin Carter, who didn't stay real long. We went to high school together, and he ended up going to the police department. But we had a really good class, a good bunch of guys. We lost several in training, some really good folks that didn't quite make it through. But the length of training for us, if I recall, was about 3.5 to 4 months total, if I remember correctly. One of the funny stories that I can remember from training was, for some reason, they made Sam Warren run with a backpack with rocks in it. Well, I thought I was going to be real heroic and do the noble thing, and so I opened my mouth and raised my hand in class, and I said, Chief, I'd like to take half his weight and carry it for him. And I thought I was really doing a good thing. Well, first thing out of their mouth was, well, we were hoping you would say something, Gibbs, and they ended up giving me my own backpack full of rocks and left his exactly like it was. And we ran with those, and in fact, we ran so much, it actually wore a place in our back. It burned the skin and made a sore place on our backs. And then, of course, we had some people who had issues doing leg lifts, and we had one guy, buddy of mine, if I remember right, it was Captain Harold Haney. We used to call him Hang Time Haney when we used to do pull-ups. And but you know, they took us through that, and we all started off at one place in training, and by the end we had doubled or tripled or quadrupled what we could do. As far as being a fireman and knowing that it's what I want to do, I've never doubted that it was exactly what I was supposed to do with my life. Oh, I know it was a calling, but I also know it was a passion. You know, there are a lot of people who get on the fire department and it's just a job. It's a paycheck, it's a schedule, it's a benefit package. Anybody who knows me knows that I absolutely love the fire service. And I have no regrets as far as becoming a fireman. I have no regrets there. When I first got out of rookie school and went to the line, I was assigned to Engine 1. And in those days, of course, we rotated battalion chiefs and captains. My first captain was Captain Dale Combs. He had been newly promoted, and I only had him 3 months. He was fantastic. He was good to me. He's very smart, and he was trying to teach me a lot of things to take me to another level. Unfortunately, through transfers and changes, I didn't get to keep him long. And to be honest with you, my first 2 years were rough. You know, anybody who knows me, who's been around me, knows that I was young and I had a lot of growing to do. And in 1987, when I was assigned to Engine 4 with Jay McCarter, that's when my life changed. Jay took me under his wing. First day, he sat me down, and he said, "I tell you one thing, son, I want you to be first in, and we're going to be the last ones out." And he said, "We're going to drink a Pepsi at 10 o'clock in the morning and eat a cracker." And he worked me to death. I mean, he absolutely, every day, we washed windows, we painted, post. He put me inside the power unit one day, and I had to paint the whole inside of the power unit, which is, if you've been in there, you know what a cramped space that is. But that was in 1987, and Jay McCarter became a father figure to me, and still is to this day. Well, when I first got stationed at Station 4 on Garl Street, I had Craig Lewis. He was a driver at that time, and Keith Ingold was there, and myself, and of course Captain McCarter. And you know, we did some switching around as far as transfers go. You know, you had each other for 2 years, and then I ended up with Cliff Oakley as a captain for a period of time, and then I ended up with Roy Mark, Captain Roy Mark, for a period of time. As far as nicknames go, you know, a lot of us had nicknames, and they kind of put Gibby on me. They would call me Gibby. Now, Scott Eanes, every once in a while, would like to call me Gumby. You know, anybody who knows who Gumby is. But Gibby was my nickname, and it has stuck with me to this day. In fact, I drive for holiday tours, and a lot of those people call me Gibby. Well, as far as pranks go in the fire department, there was always stuff going on. Anything from somebody getting on the roof, you know, and the rookie walks out from underneath the bay doors and you dump water on them, or someone being in bed at night and you crawl in there and you would wrap them in toilet paper and, you know, like a mummy into the bed. There was all kinds of things like putting eggs in people's boots, which we got in trouble for, of course. Someone hiding in a dumpster when you go out to throw trash. But one of them that really stuck out to me was we wrestled a lot. We did a lot of grabbing and wrestling and fighting and stuff, you know, for fun. And one day, Captain Tim Cox got into a little scuffle for fun at the fire station and split his shoulder open. He fell, broke the lamp off the lamp beside the bed, and he had a huge gash in his shoulder. Well, you know, you wouldn't dare call the chief. And so we threw him in the fire truck and run him down to the hospital and stitched him up right there and then run him back to the fire station. And we got away with that, thank goodness. As far as the union goes, it was pretty small during the years when we first got on, as I recall. And in fact, I didn't get in it until later. And even when I joined, it was low numbers. It wasn't until back some years ago that it really started taking off, and the numbers have exploded to what they are today. And I remember at one point, as far as the union goes, if you were a part of the union, you got transferred to one of two different stations. They were going to send all the union members to one of those two stations. I do remember that. Well, as far as firehouse life, it all depended on, you know, what crew you had and what captain you had. My favorite memories of firehouse life, you come in the morning and the guys would hang out in the kitchen. You come in early and take the guy's gear off of the truck before you. And you wanted to get there early enough so that if a call came in, he didn't have to run another call. He could go home and be with his family. So, you know, it was kind of traditional that we would all come in early and you'd go in the kitchen, you'd hang out, you might have the news on, drink a cup of coffee if you drink coffee, read the paper, transfer information to the guys. And then after that, you'd start duties. You know, you made sure the flag was up, and you know, you folded towels and got things ready for everybody. And then, but everybody did their duties. Everybody had a specific place that they cleaned up. And then if you got finished cleaning up your area, you know, you would go and help somebody else. A lot of times you'd go to the bay and start mopping and sweeping, and you just kind of as a team effort. One of the things I remember that I really loved, and I tried to keep this when I became a captain, was at 10 o'clock with Jay McCarter, Captain Carter. I don't care what you were doing, and Captain Haney knows about this too because he was there. You would stop and go to the kitchen and you would drink a Pepsi and a peanut butter cracker. That was something that you did every single shift. And of course, you like to be in first in, you know. I mean, most of my career was at 4, 7, and 8, and the guys at those stations, you know, wanted to be first in. They wanted to be the ones going into the fires, as you know. It was just, and in the evening, you know, you weren't supposed to lay around or doing, you know, you were supposed to train. We trained every day, whether it was an hour or 2 or 3 hours. We would do some type of training, whether it was in-house or go out of the station, you know, and do a drill. And then at 5 o'clock, of course, you know, you ate at 12. Traditionally, you know, you ate at 12 o'clock and you ate at 5 o'clock if you could. Saturdays you had a hot dog, and you didn't dare bring in some cheap hot dog. You know, you bought good hot dogs, and you made homemade chili and homemade slaw. In fact, when I first came on, I brought some canned food into the firehouse, and the captain took it and threw it in the trash can. It was Kyle Stewart, Engine 1, Captain Kyle Stewart, and they sent me back to the store to go get real food. And you know, you didn't bring in canned pinto beans. You wanted to make sure that you brought in bagged beans, and you had to wash them and go through the rocks and get them out and put them in the pressure cooker. There was all kind, depends on who you had, but there was, and you ate together. You didn't go out to eat. You didn't eat separate. Everybody ate as a family at the table. That's one thing I believe, is that's one of the things that's missing today. I talk to guys now, and they don't eat together. They go out a lot. And there's a lot missing as far, in my opinion, as far as the family unit, you know, and that the love. You know, I always said that who's more likely to put their life down for you, someone that you work with or someone that is actually family, you know, and that actually loves you and cares about you. I was a good cook. As far as cooking went, I wasn't a good cook at first. I could do basic stuff, but I remember being taught real quick by Big Head Jimmy Williams, and of course Cap McCarter and Roy Lee Mark and these different guys. You didn't buy biscuits, you made real biscuits, and you made cat head biscuits. And I remember that they taught me how to make a spoon biscuit, which I'd never heard of, where if you didn't have lard, you used mayonnaise and you made what they called a spoon biscuit. And you didn't buy Jiffy Mix, you made real cornbread. If you brought little boxes of Jiffy Mix in, they'd throw it in the trash can or put it on away. But they taught me how to cook, and I actually became a decent cook. My guys seemed to be pretty happy, unless they were lying to me. Lasagna. My specialty was, I liked making lasagna, and I liked making chicken cordon bleu, as far as if I wanted to kind of impress somebody. I remember my first day at Engine 1, my first call was 2314 North Church Street, Hall Towers, which became a pretty staple run for us. We went there quite frequently, there and Cone Hospital and Cone Mills and stuff. But I do remember that. And I remember my first fire was over on White Street. We had a working house fire, and I was scared to death. I was really nervous. You know, like I said, I was 19 years old. And they told me to catch the hydrant, and there was a big dog barking right there at the hydrant. It was a big old pit bull, and it was dark, and I jumped off and caught the hydrant. Everything went good, but I was nervous. I ain't gonna lie to you. As far as responses went in the fire department, you know, we ran, I think our percentage was about 70-30, 70% medical, and don't hold me to that, but I think that's a pretty good guesstimation. You know, and over those years, you know, you ride a lot of shootings and stabbings and pin-ins and, of course, everything, anything and everything, you know, we ran with EMS. A lot of them were really bad. I mean, unfortunately, the ones that stick out on your head or in your head are the things that are like decapitations, where, you know, you saw someone who had their head cut off or had their arm cut off, or the question's been asked before, you know, like, is it worth running medical calls? You know, did the fire department have any business? Because a lot of us would say, I'd hear the term, you know, I joined the fire department to run fires, not medical. And I understood that, because to me, I loved fighting fire the most. But when we were able to go and render care first in, you know, and do CPR and be there for the family first in, there was no doubt in my mind that we were doing the right thing. You know, there were so many fire stations and so few EMS bases, it only made sense, you know. And over the years, you know, our administration would tweak the manner in which companies were out of service, and, you know, they would fill in and do things. You know, we got better and better as a department, but there were a lot of lives saved because of the firemen being first in. And I know, for instance, one of my last calls, you know, we had a lady that flipped her vehicle over on the highway, and it cut her arm off right at the shoulder. And she was laying there in shock, screaming with her whole arm laying close to her. And we were able to apply, we got there before EMS, and we were able to apply a tourniquet, you know, because it was bad. And, you know, some months later we went and checked on her, and she was in a dress, you know, and had gone back to work and was doing great. She lost her arm, of course, but she was doing great. Right before I retired, there was a guy was working on his car one night, and he kicked the jack out. Well, it come down on his chest and his head. Very bad call. He was deceased when we got there. You know, he was pulseless and not breathing. And we used the hearse tool real quick to lift the car up and then crib underneath it. Started CPR on him. And we were able to do all this before the ambulance got on scene. We got him back. A few days later, we stopped by his house to check on him over there in 7th District, and he was doing great. You know, just, there's no doubt in my mind. Over the 30 years of being there, you know, you have a lot of opportunities to be a part of things. Had several structure fires and situations where, in fact, my first one was with Captain McCarter off of Martin Luther King. Went in and pulled a man out of a house fire. Gosh, Law Street, I mean, I could name many, you know, where we went in and pulled somebody out. Sometimes they made it. Law Street was one that was a really good save. But then there was others that you bring them out, do CPR. I know one of the ones that stands out that really breaks my heart was one off of Creek Ridge. I was on the squad then, on the QRV, and we got there along with Engine 15, which is 48 now. And this house was well off, you know, really rolling. And we went in there, and 2 people had gotten out that were burnt really bad. There was one more in there that I think Brooks Langley ended up bringing out. And we went to Baptist, me and another fireman went to Baptist Hospital with the 2 that had gotten out first. And they were alive and talking. And I remember thinking, man, this has really worked out well. This is going to be great. Well, as it turned out, I got a phone call. They died, both of them. They had significant respiratory injuries. This went to Superior Court in Greensboro. It was one of the first ever for a set fire, and I remember that very well. Well, I remember we had, not the downtown fire that happened on, what was it, April 13th, 1984, because we weren't even hired by then, but there was another big train depot right there behind Station 4 that burnt. Really big building, you know, multi-alarm. We had the fire over at UNCG across from where they make the brooms and stuff. I can't remember the name of that place, but that went multi-alarm, huge building, you know, and of course the home builder supply burnt numerous times, and Stone's Throw, and I mean, over the years, I mean, you run so many over a period of 30 years that a lot of times when I think back, and I still have dreams about this on occasion, there's a couple of things that stick out in my mind. Presnell Way was a fire that changed my life, and that was in 2004, where we had a floor collapse. We'd gone in trying to stop this fire, and we ended up having a floor collapse. A crew had gone in, and 2 of them went through the floor. This whole house was on fire, and we took a ladder and we ran it through the floor of the front room where they had collapsed, you know, gone through. It was all on fire, and there's some pretty great pictures out there that depict this. And we shoved a hose line down there to that crew. They were screaming, hollering, and I'll never forget it. We gave a mayday. At that time, Captain Chris Ray gave a mayday. I gave a mayday. We thought that we were going to lose 2 or 3 people. It was extremely ugly. That call changed my life, you know, and took me to a place I had never been before emotionally, you know. And as it worked out, timing-wise, a crew had come around the back and had extinguished the fire underneath them just enough to where they were not killed. Been asked before about 9/11, you know, by a lot of people over the years, like, did I know anybody? And I did. I had 9 guys that I used to go up there. People who know me know I used to go to New York and ride in the Bronx and Brooklyn and Harlem. In fact, I took Chief Carl Eller up there with me one year, and then the first time I went with Steve Fowler and Tim Cox, Cliff Oakley, and Captain Jay McCarter. And we drove up there, and me and Jay stayed at Rescue 3, Engine 45, Ladder 93, and then Cliff Oakley and Tim and Fowler stayed at Engine 75 in the Bronx. We rode 31 working building fires in 3 days, building fires. And so, you know, you develop some relationships with those firemen. Well, after 9/11, I found out that 9 of the guys that I had rode with had been killed. And of course, you know, at that point, you know, I had always thought that America was, that no one could get inside our borders and do something of that magnitude. And that changed the way I looked at things, and I realized we were vulnerable. When I talk about the things that stand out in my mind, I was there the day that Captain Jackie Beard died. I'll try to do this without getting emotional, but we had just come out of the building, and I saw him collapse, and several of us ran to him. I remember Chris Hicks being there, and Chris Morgan, and Ray Cook, and there was others. You know, we were doing a live burn for a recruit class, and we ran to him, and not to go into details, but we started CPR and all the things that are required, you know, to try to save him. And I remember as we were doing CPR, I was thinking, this is like a bad dream. You ever had a bad dream where you know you're going to wake up and it's going to be okay? You know what I'm saying? I don't know if you've ever had that. And I actually remember thinking, this is going to be okay. This isn't real. And of course, you know, we took him to Cone, and he did not survive. And everybody who knew Captain Jackie Beard knew what kind of guy he was, and to lose one of our own right in front of you and to not be able to fix it, to me was one of the hardest things that I ever dealt with in the fire service. So.
Very good.
Yeah, I've been asked many times over the years, like, who did you look up to? Like, who made a difference? And I'll tell you right now, there were quite a few. Captain J. McCarter, who was also a chief in Pinecroft-Sedgefield Fire Department, he's the one that took me under his wing. He's the one that changed my life. He's the one that made me into a fireman. He's the one that gave me the overall real passion to be way better than what I had come in at. He changed my life, and he's still a very important part of my life. But I'll be honest with you, there was so many other ones like Captain Chuck Smith and Chief Skip Nix and Chief Kerry Hensley and Captain Woody Parrish, Captain Danny Nelson, Captain Roy Mark, Captain Bob Boss. He was a captain at the time, but O.C. Johnson, and there's others. And I know I'm leaving somebody out, but these were men's men, and they got it done, you know. And Phil May, Captain Phil May, another one. As far as truckies, one of the best truck company officers that I've ever been around, and then Sawyer, you know, Ed Sawyer, Captain Sawyer, you know, who was the Indian, very intimidating when he would come and stand at an angle over your bed looking down at you, you know, and with that look. But these people are the ones that I admired so much. And of course, there were people that I admired on the department still who, you know, had not retired, you know, who I think do a fantastic job, like Captain Chuck Hall and Alex Gossett, and I could go on again still. But there were some fantastic people that I was blessed to work with and under. All of those made me into the person that I think I became, you know. I've been asked, you know, like what kind of challenges, you know, in the fire department did you have to deal with, the changes. I will say that one of the things that concerned me was the hiring process at times, you know, the way that we hire people. You know, it seemed like to me when I was hired, they were hiring people who really wanted to be a fireman. It was a passion, it was a calling. And in my opinion, I think a lot of that has changed to some degree. You know, I've never been a fan of that we should hire a particular gender or a particular color or race. I've never agreed with that. I've always thought we should hire quality individuals who really want to make a difference in this world. Of course, other challenges were just the changes. You know, you have turnout gear changes. You know, when I got hired, you know, we wore hip boots. We didn't have bunker pants. We didn't have hoods. We didn't have the 4.5 lightweight air packs. I mean, I could go on. And all these were changes, and some of them you might have been resistive to at first. I remember the hip boot change. I didn't want to wear bunker pants. It turned out to be one of the best things we could have ever done for us. But I think generationally too, and I'm sure the generation before me said the same thing about us, you know, like I was talking about at one other point about eating together, being a family, you know, having your family come over and hang out at the firehouse with you, you know, and going bowling the next day. You know, you get off duty, and if you could, the guys would get together and go bowling or go shoot guns or something, you know. I told a fireman who called me the other day, he's a captain, and he's having some issues. I won't name who it was, but he was talking about the challenges that they're facing today. And I said, you know, the one thing you got to do is do what's right in your heart. You can't always work off of a book. And I want to tell you a story about that, if you don't mind, at some point, quick. But and I said, but just be willing to sleep in the bed you make. I said, because you're going to be held accountable for the decisions that you make. And one of the things, in fact, it happened to me when I was at 14, before I went to 7 for those last 10 years. We had a call that came in for an unconscious infant. And y'all probably know what I'm talking about. And we got canceled. They said the patient had been transferred by POV. Well, I told Tommy Braswell, who was my driver, I said, let's just swing by the house real quick and just make sure everything's okay. Now, when I say it's raining, I mean it's pouring down cats and dogs. You can't see your hand in front of you. It's coming down so hard. We pull by the house. It's dark. It's empty. Nobody's there. We start heading back to the station. Well, this van pulls up beside of us in the rain, blowing their horn. They open the door. I open the door from the captain's seat, and they hand me this baby that's not breathing and it's pulseless. Well, I turned and I handed the baby up in the back of engine 14 to Butch Cummins and to Jeff Owens, and they started CPR. And I told Tommy, I said, 3961 with an infant male, CPR in progress. And he never blinked. Well, I don't know that I've ever driven that fast to a hospital in a fire truck, but Tommy Braswell can drive. And I told EMS that we were en route 39 CPR. If they want to rendezvous and transfer patient care, I'd be willing to do that. To make a long story short, we got the baby back. We got the baby into the hospital. I come out. The battalion chief was waiting there with a look on his face. Called me to his car, and he was like, what in the world just happened? Well, I told him, I said, I had to make a decision right then and there that was against protocol, it was against policy. I said, but that baby is alive. And he made it clear there was a good chance that I was going to get wrote up for it the next day. But as it happened, Chief Danny Shoemate and all of them that met and talked about this, not that they condoned that as a policy, obviously, but they went to bat for me and said, that's why we promoted Captain Gibbs. You know, we promoted someone who's not afraid to make a decision. And I knew that I would probably have to possibly live with that. There could be some repercussions, but it didn't happen. Thank the Lord. I did what I felt was right in my heart, and I could live with the fact that that baby is alive. But found out later that there were no EMS units available. We found out that they were gone. And we'd have been stranded out there for who knows how long before a unit would have got there, and that baby needed a doctor. You know, I've been asked about what kind of firehouse life and camaraderie there is, you know, being there with somebody 24 hours every third day, and a lot of times you'd be there 48 or 72 hours with somebody. The thing that I always liked the old stations where all the beds fell down in the same room. You know, you had all the beds laid out to where you went to bed at night with all your brothers in the same room. And you would talk and you would ask questions and you would pick and carry on, watch a movie, whatever. You know, and like I said, you know, you ate together. And one of the things that I always enjoyed was that, depends on what crew you had. You know, not everybody was as tight, but I had some really good groups where we would get together the next day and we'd go bowling, or we'd go shoot guns, or we'd go four-wheeling, or we'd go fishing. You know, there's a lot of fishing goes on. And then we'd bring the fish back, you know, and we'd cook it for the next day. Those are the things that I really miss, to be honest with you. In fact, there's a group of us that have been traveling to West Virginia, to Babcock State Park, for roughly 30 years. I haven't been involved the whole 30. I've been in it for about a good 20 or a little better. But we still, you know, Captain Ricky Willits, that's another mentor of mine, Ken Smith, you know, and others. You know, we still meet every year at Station 19 Park, and we drive up to Babcock. And we've all gotten older. Things have changed for us. You know, we don't do all the whitewater rafting and the things that we used to. You know, we go walking, and in fact, we'll go sit downtown and just watch traffic sometimes. But when we're there, we cook like we used to. We clean up like we used to at the firehouse. We tell stories. We play Uno. We go get ice cream, you know, together. And we've tried to hold on. That one little situation, you know, we've tried to hold on to that camaraderie that we had in the firehouse. It brings us back to that place. Gosh, you know, when you're asked about what was your best moment, you know, I was very thankful. I was happy. I was riding Rescue 5 as a firefighter. Really didn't have a big desire to be a captain. But I was seeing people around me get promoted, and I realized that one day I was probably going to be assigned somewhere that maybe wasn't so good, you know, and under somebody who I didn't feel comfortable with. And I decided to go through that process, and when I got promoted to captain, I was very, very thankful. That was a good day for me, especially based on my career. You know, I had some ups and downs, especially those first couple years. But it had been a fantastic ride. I mean, I have no regrets. And I enjoyed being a company officer, but seeing my guys rescue somebody, I know to see one of my men pull somebody out of a fire, I can't even describe what that did for me. It's kind of like Christmas. You actually get more out of giving to somebody than getting. And I love training with these guys and watching them grow. The saves, you can think about all the different calls you went on, cutting somebody out of a car, big time extrications. All those things are fantastic. But I actually think that seeing the people that you worked with grow and get confidence, to me, was one of the things that was a big deal to me. Chief Nix always said, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. I really think that's an awesome statement, because I think I said this earlier, who is most likely to really give you their best and lay their life down? Someone who just comes and it's a job, they work with you, or someone who loves you like family? And that was evident on the Elm Street fire that happened, back several years ago, and you watched what took place, and how everybody bonded. I mean, that was family. Those crews were close to each other. When I drive for a holiday, a lot of times I'll have somebody on the bus. They know I'm a fireman, and they'll ask me questions about calls that we ran, and they'll want to know, well, how do you deal with it? And I'll be honest, I personally dealt with it pretty good, especially when it was an older person. I knew they had lived a long life. I could deal with it. I think the ones that really stuck out is when you saw someone suffer, when you saw a child get killed. One of my last shootings, they had killed this young boy's father. We were doing CPR on the father, and then we looked and saw a pair of feet sticking out of a closet. It was a 7-year-old. The person who had killed the boy's father took the handgun and blew the boy's face literally off of him. It was gone. There was nothing to work with, and he was deceased. And I still think about that call regularly. I mentioned this earlier, Captain Beard, I don't consider this a post-traumatic stress issue. I do think about him every single week. There is not a week that goes by that I don't really think about Jackie at some point. And I think it's because of the indelible mark that it leaves on your brain. I didn't realize until I retired how much weight comes off of you in a different way. There was an underlying stress that I didn't really think. I'd heard that, and I didn't really buy into it until I retired. And then I felt all this weight or pressure kind of come off of me. I know we were talking earlier about fires and being pulled out, and of course people like me and others, your Cliff Oakleys, we didn't want to come out. We wanted to win. And yet, until you put yourself in the people that are over you and into their shoes, you realize that they're the ones that got to live with it if something happens to you. A lot of those things kind of come together for me the older I got, and as I got promoted and had different responsibilities. When I'm asked who made a mark on my life outside the fire service, that was my grandmother. My grandmother was my very best friend. Being adopted, I never knew any real family. I never had any blood family. But she was my adopted grandmother, and she loved me in a way that I've never been loved before. She was my very, very best friend, and she lived a full life. And I know where she's at. I know she's in heaven. Along with that, one of the people that I really admire greatly is Billy Graham. And in fact, recently I was able to go to his gravesite, him and Ruth, and he had a simple message. I think if I could change anything in my life, the one thing I think I would do different, I wish I had been more like Captain Gary Church. No one who was around him would ever doubt that he was a man of God, that he loved the Lord. I wish I would have been that guy. I'm very proud of my career. I'm very thankful for everything, the good and the bad. If I could do anything different, I wish I had been a better Christian. Because when you look at Captain Gary Church, everybody knew. If you look at Chief Skip Nix, you know he's a good father, he's a good family man, he was a good chief, and he loves the Lord. I wish I had been more like them. If I'm ever given the opportunity to go speak to an upcoming rookie class, the one thing or a couple things that I would want to tell them is that, in my opinion, this is the best job in the world, and it goes by way too fast. For me, I can't believe that I was there a little over 30 years, and I've already been retired over 4, and I can't even fathom that. And I would tell them to make the best you can of each day, because it does go by fast, you know. Make those friends and keep them, you know, because you're going to lose some of them. You know, once in a while I'll grab the old book and look at the past, and I'm a little overwhelmed at how many are gone. It'll kind of get to you, you know, and make the most out of the job they're getting ready to go into, and learn something. You know, I was always told, you know, every officer, every chief, every firefighter, take the good and the bad and remember it, you know, because you got to be your own person. You know, like I told you earlier, you know, you're going to have some really tough times. For me, it was my early years, and it got better.
We hope you enjoyed watching these documentaries. It was our goal to share and preserve the memories of our retired Greensboro firefighters. It is our desire that these documentaries will inspire future generations to continue the brotherhood, sisterhood, and camaraderie while always striving for excellence in their careers. While fire apparatus, equipment, and technology have improved, several things will always remain the same. The courage and bravery it takes to mitigate natural and man-made disasters will always be a part of the job. Although our retirees are no longer a physical part of the GFD world, a giant piece of each retiree's memories have been shared with you today. These memories will be in their hearts and minds forever. A special thank you goes out to Captain Harold Haney for his many long hours of recording and editing. Thank you, Harold. A job well done.